Who said that the broad mass of a nation will more easily fall for a big lie than a small one? And why is that important? Adolf Hitler said it. And it's important because we know that that nation fell for a huge lie and what the consequences were. The importance also is to understand the nature of argument. And understanding the nature of argument helps you to think clearly. It helps us avoid demagoguery, the descent of society into totalitarianism, and it helps us to maintain respectful discourse. So if you want to avoid society fragmenting on shallow argument, if you want to be able to think clearly, and if you want to be able to evaluate what you read, well, then you need to understand the nature and anatomy of disagreement. Disagreement has a hierarchy. Let's go through each of the stages in that hierarchy. The lowest form of disagreement is name-calling. We see it all the time in politics. We have the do-nothing Democrats, we have the fake news media, we have the corrupt Bidens. We're not dealing with any point that they make. We're just saying it's fake or they're corrupt. It's just attacking the individual. The second way is ad hominem. And this is a slightly different attack on the individual. It's saying you're one of them, aren't you? You're not from our tribe. You don't think the way we think. So therefore, your view doesn't matter. Just discount it. It's not important. We don't stop. We don't evaluate. We don't wonder, could there be any validity in it? No, you're one of them. We're not listening to you. The next way that we argue is responding to tone. This happens an awful lot in hierarchical organizations where something is said that the senior person doesn't like and they say, "Don't you speak to me like that," or "How dare you propose that in that tone of voice?" So it's used to suppress the expression of any point, any contradiction. It's just dealing with the tone rather than the point being made. The next form is contradiction. And when you contradict, you basically say, "I know more than you do. You're wrong. It doesn't matter what you say. You're wrong." You see a huge amount of this on Twitter. "You're absolutely wrong. That's rubbish. You're talking BS." Go onto Twitter and you will see all forms of argument in there. Most of it that doesn't deal with the central point being made, whether it has any validity or not. The next form is counter-argument. And counter-argument is putting forward a valid point that has nothing to do with the main point of the argument. So it's points scoring without dealing with the main point. So it's a little bit like hitting perfectly executed tennis shots from the opposite end of different courts. It's a point that you score against nobody, except it does often convince people who don't understand anything about the nature of argument that actually you're scoring points. And if you don't understand the nature of argument, scoring points helps you to give the impression that you're winning. And in politics, winning the argument makes you right. So it's important to win the argument. So therefore, you argue with whatever points you can possibly make, whether they go to the central point or not. The next form of argument is refutation. And again, this doesn't quite go to the central point being made, but what it does is that it makes peripheral points around the edges of the main point that are valid, but that are not important. So it seems to address or nibble away at the edges of the argument, but it's not dealing with the main point. But again, it gives the impression that you're scoring points. The real way to argue is actually to have an opinion that's based on an understanding of the other side of the argument and be able to counter the points, the major points that are made. Charlie Munger, a very bright man who reads an enormous amount, has said, "You're not entitled to your opinion unless you can argue the other side just as well." Now, how many people hold opinions based on the shallowest of arguments that are made by their tribe or their fellow believers, that are dedicated to whatever cause they are without any understanding of what they stand for other than they're one of us, we do whatever they do. This is not a basis on which we should build our societies. This is a basis on which our societies will fragment, in which our discourse will be nothing but disagreeable. So if you want to be able to think for yourself, to recognize bad argument, and to avoid being taken in by the big lie, which will eventually cause the disintegration of society, I think you should consider the nature of the disagreement hierarchy.